All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and our latest set of RBT exam practice questions where we're going through this set together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials as well as our combo pack. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Zach receives $1 based on his reinforcement schedule that provides him reinforcement after 5 minutes. Zach has learned the schedule and will wait until 5 minutes is over to respond to any questions. What can you do to increase Zach's responding? Basic reinforcement schedule. As we know, we have 4 basic schedules. We have fixed intervals, fixed ratios, and variable ratios. And each schedule has a benefit and it has a con. And that's most things, right? There's pros and cons to everything. Typically we do in ABA. And so there's certain scenarios where we're going to use a fixed schedule, certain where we would use variable. In this case, Zach is on what type of schedule? Well, we know he receives reinforcement after 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, Zach is getting reinforced following the response once 5 minutes has elapsed. The problem is Zach learned the schedule, and now he's waiting until 5 minutes is over to respond to any questions. Now, why would Zach do that? Well, on a fixed schedule, the requirement is never changing. So what Zach has learned is I don't have to do anything until 5 minutes is over, because even if I start to respond prior to 5 minutes being over, I'm not getting reinforced until time is up. So instead, I'll just wait until 5 minutes is over, I'll respond once, and I'll get my reinforcement. That's a problem, because now Zach is only responding once every 5 minutes. That's an issue. So we need to change something. So what are we going to do to increase Zach's responding? And in order to answer questions like this, you're trying to solve the problem. What's our problem? Well, Zach has learned the schedule. He is now only responding after 5 minutes. So let's solve that issue. A, lengthen the fixed interval to 10 minutes. Well, what is A going to do? Well, Zach's just going to learn the schedule of 10 minutes, and now he's going to wait 10 minutes to respond. It's going to decrease the responding. A is not a good solution. B, switch to a fixed ratio schedule. What's wrong with B? Well, B is still fixed, meaning if Zach learned the fixed schedule once, there's a chance he continues to learn the fixed schedule. So in that case, let's say we switch to a fixed ratio 4 where it takes 4 responses. Zach might just wait until he's ready, respond 4 times, get reinforcement. And then he'll wait until he's ready, respond 4 times. That's the issue with fixed schedules. They can be learned and they can be manipulated by the learner. So the switching to another fixed schedule doesn't really solve the issue. What about C, switch to a variable interval schedule? This is a better idea than switching to another fixed interval or to a fixed ratio. With a variable ratio schedule, Zach will not be able to figure out the actual schedule because there is no actual schedule. It's on an average. He might get reinforcement after 3 minutes. He might not get reinforcement until 8 minutes because it's going to be on an average of, let's say, 5 minutes. This way, Zach can't predict when he needs to respond. This is why variable schedules are so powerful, because the learner can't predict when they can respond. They have to continuously respond throughout learning because they never know when reinforcement is coming. So in order to solve this issue, in order to increase Zach's responding, we could switch to a variable interval schedule. Mark goes at the tailgate before the big football game on Saturday night. The tailgate lasts 9 hours and Mark drinks 18 beers. How could you describe the rate of drinking beer? So a measurement question talking about rate. And what is rate? Rate is frequency over time. Although frequency and rate are typically and often used interchangeably, they're different things. Frequency is a count. It's a very simple count. Rate, we take that count, we add time, making it more specific. In this case, what's our frequency? Start there. Our frequency is 18. Mark drank 18 beers. What is our time? Because for rate, we need time. Our time is 9 hours. So Mark drank 18 beers over 9 hours. So how you're typically going to say rate is you're going to say frequency per time. In this case, you could say 18 beers per 9 hours, which would be accurate. Or if we want to reduce it, which we would typically do, we could say 2 beers per hour. So let's look at A. 18 beers. 18 beers simply describes our frequency, does not describe the rate. Why not? because we're missing the time component. What about B? 18 beers per 9 hours. Well, we have our frequency, 18 beers, per is our rate, 9 hours is our time. B looks great. Do we pick B and move on? No, we read every single answer choice. C, 2 beers per hour. C and B are the exact same thing, except C is reduced or simplified. Instead of 18 beers per 9 hours, we now have 2 beers per hour. We're saying the same exact thing. Both are rate, both are accurate. So how would you describe the rate of drinking beer? Well, D, both B and C. A preschool teacher hands one of her learners a green bear and says, go put it in the green bucket, and the learner does. The teacher asks the same learner to do a jumping jack, and the learner does. The learner is demonstrating what? What is the learner demonstrating? Now we have two people in this situation. We have the teacher and the learner. Whose behavior are we looking at? We're looking at the learner. What is the learner demonstrating? Let's see. The teacher says, go put the bear, or go put it in the green bucket. The learner complies. The teacher says, do a jumping jack. The learner complies. What is this learner demonstrating? He's hearing what the teacher is asking them to do, and they're doing that. They're complying, or they're engaging in the behavior that was requested. What are they demonstrating? A, expressive language skills. What is the difference between expressive and receptive language skills? Expressive language is what I'm doing right now. I'm communicating. I'm talking. Receptive language is what this learner is doing. They're following instructions, meaning they're hearing what someone is saying and they're responding to it, essentially. That is receptive language. Now, B is obviously our right answer, right? Receptive language. What about C? What about listener behavior? And so in recent years, receptive language a lot of times has started to be referred to as listener behavior, right? Because you have a speaker, and this is more along the lines of BCBA stuff, but it's good for you to know. You have speakers, right? In this case, the teacher is the speaker, and you have a listener. And when the listener is doing what the speaker is asking them to do, it's listener behavior, right? And so the learner is demonstrating not only receptive language skills, but also listener behavior. Because again, B and C are one and the same. Just like our previous question, B and C are the same thing. Therefore, our answer is D, both B and C. You are assisting with an assessment that is taking place virtually through Zoom. Your supervisor asks the parent, focuses the camera on the client for 10 minutes so that you and them can observe the child playing with their toys. The supervisor tells you to take duration data on the items the client interacts with. What type of preference assessment are you likely conducting? Preference assessment question, and we need to identify what assessment we are conducting. Where do we start in preference assessment questions? We ask ourselves, how many stimuli, how many items are we assessing? Well, if we're assessing one item at a time, we're going to pick single choice, most likely. 2 items together is likely forced choice. 3 or more is typically multiple stimulus or a free operant. In this case, you're assisting, it's taking place through Zoom. Your supervisor says, can you focus the camera on the client for 10 minutes so we can observe the child playing with their toys? Now, we don't specifically know how many toys there are. We know there are more than one because it's plural, and we're going to watch this client for 10 minutes. Now, what's separating this from something like A, single choice, or B, forced choice? Well, with a single choice and a forced choice, we don't simply observe. We present items to the person or the learner, and we have them pick. Here, we're just observing them playing with their toys for 10 minutes. That's it. We're not forcing them to engage in anything. We're not asking them to pick anything. We're just observing as they interact with their environment, and we're taking data. So we can eliminate single choice and forced choice because we're not forcing them to pick anything. Then you have D, multiple stimulus. With the multiple stimulus, even though you don't have 2 items or 1 item, you're just presenting to them, you're still contriving it to where you're controlling what they can interact with. Because in a multiple stimulus assessment, I have an array of items that I picked, and that's the only items that the learner can pick from. What we're doing here is we're just allowing the child to interact with their environment without any constraints or rules. Therefore, this is naturalistic or free operant. You're typically going to deal with single choice, forced choice, and multiple stimulus, but you need to know what a free operant assessment is, right? And you have to understand what's the difference between a free operant and a single choice, forced choice, and multiple stimulus. The main difference between a free operant and the other three are in the other three, you are picking what the child can interact with, and that's the only thing they can interact with. In a free operant, you're not giving them any rules or constraints on what they can engage with. It's naturalistic. In this case, it's free operant. You're discussing extinction with one of your client's parents. They tell you that they are comfortable putting behavior on extinction, but they don't think that the grandparents would be comfortable with that type of intervention. Why might this be an issue? So why would this be an issue? What's the issue? Well, the grandparents aren't comfortable with the type of intervention. What's the intervention? Extinction. Notice as I'm going through the question, I didn't go to the answer choices yet, and I'm asking myself questions as I go through it, right? And so the grandparents aren't comfortable with extinction. Why is that a problem? Why would that be a problem if the parents are okay with extinction, but the grandparents are not? Well, what do we know about extinction? Extinction is withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. And if you're going to implement extinction, you have to implement extinction as close to 100% of the time as possible. If you can't do that, that's an issue. So let's look at A. The grandparents need to be fully committed to any intervention that was suggested. Not necessarily, right? It is not the grandparents' duty or responsibility to fully commit to our interventions. In a lot of cases, grandparents don't want anything to do with our interventions. They're the grandparents. They're not managing behavior. They're giving the kids lollipops and candy and love. Okay? So it's not the grandparents' duty or responsibility at all to be fully committed to the intervention that was suggested. A is out. B, we should start with the reinforcement procedure before extinction. Not necessarily, most of the time, if not all the time, extinction and reinforcement are going hand in hand. C is the problem. Extinction needs to be done as close to 100% of the time as possible. And what's the problem? What's the difference between C and A? Well, C is a fact. Extinction has to be done as close to 100% of the time as possible to truly be effective. The problem with A is just because we suggest an intervention does not mean the stakeholders, in this case the grandparents, have to be on board. They can disagree, and that's their right to disagree. And so just to tell them, well, you have to commit to anything we suggest is just wrong. It's undignified. It's not respectful. They're part of the team. They're part of the collaboration. Why is this actually an issue? A factual issue is if they're not committed and they don't think they're comfortable with that type of intervention, it's not going to be implemented 100% of the time or as close to. And all we're going to do is likely make the behavior worse. So the issue is extinction needs to be done as close to 100% of the time as possible. A new reinforcement schedule is implemented in your client's school. As a result, the client is participating more in class. Now, in your clinic, the client is participating less in activities. What term might be used to describe this phenomenon? Let's think about the phenomenon occurring here. A reinforcement schedule is implemented in school. The client participates more. In the other environment, the clinic, the client is participating less. There's a very specific term for this phenomenon where behavior changes in one setting, it changes the opposite way in the other setting. What do we call that? A, motivating operations. Could motivating operations be in play here? Sure. This is not the phenomenon, though. Motivating operations does not describe why behavior increases in one setting and decreases in another, or vice versa. What we're looking at is B, behavior contrast. Behavior is contrasting from the clinic to the class. And why might that occur? Well, because the reinforcement schedule changed in the school, it might have not changed in the clinic. That's a problem. C, bootleg reinforcement. You don't necessarily need to know bootleg reinforcement. But bootleg reinforcement is when the learner gains reinforcement without engaging in the target behavior. And then D, behavior regression. Remember, regression is not a technical term. We want to try to avoid using it. The phenomenon where the behavior of interest increases or decreases in one setting and goes the other way in another setting is called behavior contrast. A client of yours is going through spontaneous recovery for a behavior that you haven't seen in almost a month. If you did not have immediate access to your supervisor, what is the ideal way to respond to behavior? Let's think about this. You don't have immediate access to your supervisor because typically, right, we're contacting them right away or getting in touch with them. Question says you don't have immediate access. In any case, if spontaneous recovery is occurring, what is happening? Well, spontaneous recovery occurs when a previously extinct behavior, meaning that behavior is gone or been on extinction, it's extinct, reappears. So what do we need to do when spontaneous recovery is occurring? A, ignore the behavior and continue whatever you were doing prior to the behavior starting. Well, you can't just ignore the behavior. We don't know what the behavior is. It could be aggression, it could be property destruction, it could be dangerous. But we can't just ignore it and act like it's not happening because it is happening. Even though we got rid of it before, now it's back. We have to do something. B, implement a punishment procedure for the behavior. Well, we don't want to implement punishment, right? Punishment's the last resort. And we've already gotten rid of it using extinction, so there's no reason to jump to punishment. C, if known, implement the prior behavior plan that was previously used for the behavior. Absolutely. In the case of spontaneous recovery, if you know the behavior plan, that's the behavior plan we should use once the behavior comes back. That's the ideal way to treat spontaneous recovery. Whatever works first, do it again. D, let the parents know immediately and ask them to take over. No, it's your responsibility here. No, you should be letting your supervisor know as soon as possible about spontaneous recovery, but in the moment, you have to take action. And in the moment, you need to implement the prior behavior plan that was previously used for the behavior. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.